Think it's working now. I think so. Microphone looks like it's working. Hello, everyone. Another Q&A. Ask questions and whatnot. It was interesting doing this because people seemed surprised that this was even a thing. Like, people came in and oh, you do Q&As? It's a surprise. And I'm like, what about the really long series of Q&A videos I've been uploading lately? But I guess people didn't catch those. I guess. I pop out chat and full screen that so I can stop looking at a stream of my own face because that's distracting. How is everyone doing today? We'll probably be a little longer. I started about a half an hour early this time. Gonna open this while I wait for questions to come in. There we go. Started like a half an hour early this time. Goal being to not infringe on the podcast time, which we usually record somewhere around 4 or something like that. Let it bleed over last time. There was a lot of questions last time. I was looking at the scroll bar and I was like, I think halfway through scrolling when I had to just stop because I'm like, it's we're too far in. It's too far. How's your day? It has been. I haven't started yet. Kind of. I had errands to run and whatnot. Weirdly, I kind of had like a last one kind of had like a crisis last time we did the Q&A because I was looking at BMI and stuff like that. So I've since reshuffled my entire sleep schedule so that I can start waking up closer to 8 o'clock in the morning so I can try to go on walks when it's not morbidly, horribly burning hot outside in California. So that's been fun. Found out that in with the last 2 years or so of the last approximately 2 years of running the channel full time ish, my feet have gotten kind of bad at walking, which has been fun. So I found out that, like, I need to build up calluses and crap like that in order to go on longer walks. Otherwise, like, actual blistering can happen, which is like a foreign concept to me because I used to be in geology and we used to go on trips and hikes all the time, and I used to walk whenever. So like the idea that your feet can get shit at walking was a concept that was foreign to me. What inspired you to study geology? Nothing. It's not. There was no inspiration. I went to school because I was raised to go to school. It's that boring explanation, but it's the reason why a lot of people of my generation went to college is because we were just raised to go to college. A lot of us were just told you go to school, you go to high school, you go to high school for the purpose of getting good grades so that you can get into a good college, and you go to college to get a good job. And generally, the people that are doing that are your parents who never went to college. So they don't really know what college does to make you get a good job exactly. They just know that it makes you get a good job, apparently. So they raise you to go to college and they start a college fund, but they also expect you to get good grades in high school so they can apply for grants and scholarships and all that, so I did that whole shebang. And being some nerd that liked video games, I'm like, I'll do computer science. That's the most logical thing to try. And I hated computer science. I lasted like 3 semesters, and eventually I was just like, I can't take this my entire life being essentially a professional proofreader. Because like the fun part of computer science is to try to create a machine, a virtual machine that performs the tasks you want. That's why playing Factorio and Infinifactory and Space Cam and stuff like that is fun, is making a fake virtual machine do the things you want to do. But what sucks is when something's wrong with that machine, and now you have to spend all day or all week diagnosing what's wrong with that. And I was already hating it in school. I didn't really want to continue forward with my entire job being like that. So I took 1 semester off from having a major. I just decided, screw it. Let's just progress towards getting a bachelor's degree just in general. Like, what are the general requirements for being able to get a bachelor's degree? Because I was raised to go to school and get a degree. So I just took a bunch of general classes, and at the end of that semester, I still kind of didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. So I was like, in high school, I liked physical sciences. So I looked through the list of physical sciences, and I looked at which ones I had already taken the most GE for. And geology actually has probably the most overlap of general education courses that with computer science. And I was like, that seems fine. And I just tried geology and I made it through and got the degree. I'm like, oh, I guess that worked out. So I don't have any particular like childlike wonder or inspiration about geology. It's fine. And in fact, as far as physical science classes go, it's probably one of the most fun ones to take. You get to go on field trips constantly, camping trips with your classmates, and geology is also a very unpopular physical science course. So you're likely going to have the same students in all of your classes throughout the entirety of going through there, or at least that was the case for me. I went to Sac State, so uh, there might be bigger universities or ones where it's just more popular or something. But for us, there was literally one course. There was one class of geology students that was going through each thing. It was like how you'd have grades in high school and in elementary school, like first grade, second grade, and stuff like that. It's like you were with the same class throughout your entire major, unless you like did it in slightly out of order or took a semester off from geology courses to get GE done. Then you were essentially like, it was like you were held back, and you were now taking the classes with the next grade below ours, essentially. So that was interesting, being around the same people for like 2 years throughout a major, as opposed to computer science, which is super popular. So every time I entered a classroom, it was different people entirely. That was an interesting experience, and I like taking geology. The trips and everything are fun, and you learn interesting things and everything. But there was no inspiration. I just kind of found my way there, which is how I got here. That's how this YouTube channel happened too. Is I just kind of fell into something. I'm like, huh, I guess this is my life now. Okay. Are you safe? What? I don't know what you're talking about. What's your favorite Final Fantasy title? Final Fantasy X and Tactics are the only ones I've ever liked that I've played. Which is not a big list of games anyway. I played 10, 13, 13.2, Type 0, 15, Tactics. Wow, when I start listing them, that's a lot of Final Fantasy games still. There's too many of them, so it's like a tiny chunk of the series, but I'm like, that's like, did I just list like 6 or 7 games? So I have played a lot of Final Fantasy games technically. It's just there's a lot more. But 10's probably my favorite. Tactics is fine too, but I never cared. I either never cared about its story or it didn't have one. I genuinely can't remember the story of Tactics, but it was fine. That was my first. I played Tactics because I liked Fire Emblem and Advance Wars, so I moved on to Final Fantasy Tactics, and I think I liked Advance Wars and Fire Emblem better than Final Fantasy Tactics. Type 0 and 15 and 13 and 13.2 all have terrible stories, like just god-awful stories, whereas 15 and Type 0 also don't have particularly great gameplay. The difference being that Type 0 had god-awful gameplay on basically every facet, whereas Final Fantasy 15 had passably mediocre, bland gameplay, but it had a good gameplay loop. The experience of getting in your car with your friends, listening to Final Fantasy music, driving to where the weird monsters are, fighting the weird monsters, going for jobs, like the loop of playing the game was actually pretty enjoyable. But once you get past the first half or so, you realize the story is a nightmare that was it was just not finished being written before they started making the game, and it's just a weird mess. And the gameplay is just kind of a button masher, so there's not much to think about, and it's not very engaging. Type 0 is probably the worst Final Fantasy game I've played. 13 and 13.2, I actually like the gameplay. I actually like the part where everyone has classes and you create subsections, not subset. You create what do they call them in Call of Duty? You create loadouts. You basically create class loadouts for your party and hot swap between them. Like, this is the part where one person tanks and everybody heals for them, and this is the one where one person aggroes, one person debuffs, and one person DPSs and stuff like that. Like that, doing that thing where you're kind of picking subclasses, then kind of auto battling was kind of a neat system. But their stories were frustrating. 13 had a lot of problems, but then 13.2 made the mistake of being a time travel storyline, and it just became one of the worst stories because it has incomprehensible time travel storytelling, and I'm somebody who likes time travel stories, and that was one of the worst ones I've seen. 15 is just good old-fashioned turn-based combat where you have to pay attention to what you're doing, and there's hard bosses along the way that will punish you for screwing up, and the story keeps taking twists and turns and has a series of likable characters. And I played it when I was 10, so I haven't played it since, or whenever it came out. But it's the one Final Fantasy game that I have the most exclusively positive feelings about that I've played, and I've never played 1 through 9 except for a except for a brief stint with the PC version of 7, where I was kind of along for the ride for a little while till I escaped the first intro city area that where all the story goes down, and they dump you in the green field, and there's a chocobo ranch, there's a giant worm, and I'm like, where am I going? What am I doing? What's the story even going towards in this direction? Which happened in both 7 and 13. In both 7 and 13, there's a part where the story seems to have hit a big climax. Then they just dump you in a green field full of monsters, and it feels like it loses all focus. And then I'm like, every time I sit down and play the game, I'm like, where am I going? Why do I want to keep going? It almost feels like the story managed to stop or something. And I just wasn't that into it, so I didn't continue. I didn't play 7 when it was new, so I don't understand the hype wave that happened, and I never really got far enough because the combat never got as interesting as it did in 10, which, I mean, it's an older game, so maybe they just had less ideas back then. But I'll probably because I have a YouTube channel, I'm sure I'll have to play I'll probably have no choice but to play the remake of it when it comes out. And so I can be an untarnished opinion that's not biased by nostalgia, I guess, because I don't care about the original version. I'm not even like anti it. I just apathetic towards it. That was way too much to answer for Final Fantasy, probably. Let's see. I only watch your puzzle game series. How do you feel about that? That's the reason why I create a variety of things on my channel, is that I know demographics are a thing. When I started my channel, I played Outlast on a whim because I tried to do it for Sad Games with Andrew, but he didn't want to do that, and so I went off and just did it separately. And then I started doing Demon Souls, and Demon Souls was the first thing I uploaded that kind of had like a bump where it started kind of doing well. So I was like, okay, let's think about this. Let's do Dark Souls next, and Dark Souls 2. And like it became a logical progression of like, if I want to grow an audience, I should play a thing, and if it does well, play other things that follow in the line of how that thing did well to try to capture that audience and make them come back after the first game. And that's based on partially on how when I was making videos with Andrew for like over 2 years at that point, we would just play whatever we felt like every time, just random games all the time. And we had like no growth. If a series did super well, it wouldn't affect the rest of the channel because it'd be like that series did pretty well, and then we'd peter out again because the next thing we chose didn't capitalize on that progression at all, and so it didn't get people to stick around. So I learned from my own mistakes, and so as a result, I became an action RPG channel for a little while with a specific focus on anything that was even vaguely Souls-like. So when I saw Bound by Flame and it had a third-person camera and a health recovery system and lock-on camera and risk-reward combat where you can die very quickly and stuff like that, and a dodge roll, I'm like, okay, that's close enough to Dark Souls. Let's play that when I finish Dark Souls 2 and stuff like that. And that was my progression for a while. Then we got to Legend of Grimrock, and it was an RPG that had puzzles in it, and people seemed to be really into the puzzles, and seemed to keep saying about how they enjoyed watching me solve puzzles. So I started playing Talos Principle, Witness, anything else in that kind of realm, and that became my logical progression forward. So I'm well aware of demographics and well aware of the idea that if somebody shows up for one thing, they often only want more of that kind of thing, which is why there's kind of a specific range for the games I play. That's why you'll see like adventure games and puzzle games and action RPGs and stuff, and indie walking simulators. Just anything that's done well before, I often will continue forward in directions based on that. And there's a fair amount of thought process that goes into how I filter games. Whereas you've so far not seen me play like a Tony Hawk game, for example, because it'd be such a weird departure. Thankfully, now my channel has grown to an extent where I can get away with just accepting the risk there, like accepting that people like you will only watch a specific thing and not other things. I can accept that and just play stuff that doesn't fit that anyway, like 999 or Sonic Unleashed and stuff like that, because my channel's big enough and self-sustains enough that I can get away with that now, and I can just take that risk. But yeah, I'm very much aware, and I think about that. And there's no hard feelings about people watching what they want. People watch what they want, and the first thing I tell people when they complain about a series for one reason or other, I usually say, "Stop watching. It's fine. I don't. It's fine. You don't have to watch everything I make out of loyalty. Every series appeals to different people." Besides Dungeons and Dragons, have you tried any other tabletop RPGs? If so, which ones? I have played Vampire the Masquerade and Shadowrun very, very, very briefly. Very briefly. I played Shadowrun for one session. It was a terrible, terrible experience. My friend Sid, who is the guy that used to DM our D&D campaigns, brought in his friend that DMs Shadowrun campaigns, and I had never really heard of Shadowrun aside from being aware of the existence of that one Shadowrun third-person shooter. I'd never played any of the games before or been exposed to any of the setting. I had almost no exposure to the concept of cyberpunk. I had never played a Deus Ex game. I had never played the many, many cyberpunk games I've now played on this channel, including a Shadowrun game. So I had none of the exposure. And they made me a fixer. Is that the one where you do logistics and it's basically a job that requires you to know about the world, which meant I was basically useless. I was essentially making dice rolls to see if I knew about stuff, and then the guy would tell me what I knew, and basically he was essentially playing the character for me. So that was a disaster because I didn't understand the world. I played a Vampire the Masquerade campaign where the DM where Sid was the one DMing it, and he was doing fine, just like he did in our D&D campaigns. I made a vampire that was one of those people that's like vaguely beast-like. I forgot the different races and the clans or whatever they're called, the families in Vampire the Masquerade. But I was playing as one of the beast ones because I have a tendency to play that kind of character. Like every MMO we play, I usually play as the vaguely werewolfy thing because it's a departure from what I play in every other game where that's not an option. So the variety's nice. And it was fun. I like this. I like that had a system where you could inflict bad things on your character for the reward of getting good things. So you would do things that were like a permanent negative thing that would also give you an upside, and you'd have to deal with that trade-off. It's like a lot like, I think they had that system in Fallout 1 and 2 and a lot of older CRPGs, is that they'd have a system where you could essentially hurt your character to help your character. You'd get a perk and a negative, and you have to deal with them both. And that's just a decision about your character. That was cool. Series didn't last very long because we had very bad role players in our party. And I'm not going to pretend I'm amazing at it or anything, especially when it comes to dialogue. Like, I don't feel great about how I role play generally, but I at least will generally keep player knowledge and character knowledge straight, which is actually an ongoing thing in our D&D campaign right now, because right now Bird and Shell have not told me where I am or what we're doing in our D&D campaign. So my character is continuing to proceed forward as if I don't know where I am or what I'm doing. So I've even called that out a few times, and they still haven't told me. So I'm still pretending I don't know. And so according to that, like, these guys were bad at that. Like during our D&D campaign, a friend of mine would attack. I was introducing one of my character to the campaign as a druid in creature form, and his monk was attacking my druid because he was a random piece of wildlife, and he was attacking me because he knew I was the guy sitting across the table controlling that character. But his character doesn't know that random piece of wildlife is a shapeshifted druid. He made no rolls or attempts to decipher that kind of thing. And they were ruining our vampire campaign because they were essentially walking around in suburban neighborhoods and like mass slaughtering people for no reason. And then calling me lazy or a coward because I was like hanging out at the front lawn, not going into the houses, being like, I don't know what they're doing. But it was really because like they were treating like suburban neighborhoods like it's a dungeon to raid. They couldn't separate role-playing campaigns from Diablo 2 gameplay, basically. So I haven't had great experiences with any of the other tabletop games I've ever tried, but both of them are, of course, the other people's fault to an extent, but I had a better experience with Vampire because we actually got to play for more than a little bit. Are you recording video games in one day and then you upload them? Not really sure what that means, honestly. Uh, but I can just explain, I guess, what I mean, what I do. Uh, so do I record the entire game in one day? Generally, no. Most games are not short enough to even possibly do that. A lot of RPGs and stuff are way too long for that. But also, no, I don't record videos the day they go up or the day before they go up exclusively. Uh, if I'm recording a video the same day it's going up, then something has gone wrong because it takes time to render videos. You have to edit, you have to record the video, then you have to edit the video, then you have to render the video. And rendering the video generally takes longer than the duration of the video. So as somebody who makes hours of content every day, I can't do the Philip DeFranco thing and just make one video that morning, pass it off to my editor, then it gets rendered off and uploaded, and that's the daily cycle. Because the rendering part would take hours and hours and hours of every single day. So what I do is I record I'll often record for hours. Then that night I'll edit it, and then I'll set it up to render overnight. And then in the morning the videos will be ready, and I'll upload them. Generally, I'm not uploading. I'm generally not recording the exact videos that are going up tomorrow. Let's say 6 videos are coming up tomorrow for 6 different games, which is my basic schedule, plus or minus the multiplayer stuff for podcasts and whatnot. So right now it's Observer, State of Decay, Riven, 999, Pillars of the Earth, and Pyre. I can actually show you this. So this is the thing I have. Can't really read it all, but those are all hash marks written in Sharpie. So on the top, I have what day it is. This is the beginning, and it goes like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and so on. And then on this side would be the names of the games, which you can't read because of the glare of brightness and stuff. But I have a series. I just cross out this is grid paper, which you also can't tell. But I literally just sit there and cross out the days as I record them. So right now, tomorrow, I already have Pillars and 999 and State of Decay and Riven are all recorded. So what I need to record for tomorrow is Observer and Pyre. So what I'll probably do is I'll probably record like 2 hours of Observer and 2 hours of Pyre, or whatever I have to end up having time for. Those 2 hours will presumably be 4 episodes. So when I edit it and I'm like, that's how many videos I made, I'll just cross out that many squares, and that's how I know how much is left to be done, is by making it so I can tell on this thing. And I also have a redundant thing for this is for the recording process. I also have a thing, I use Google Calendar to keep track of my upload schedule so I can tell what has and hasn't been uploaded. And so it's a redundant check in a way to make sure that I'm keeping up with my schedule and everything. Generally, I prefer to record 1 or 2 games per day for several episodes at a time, because juggling 6 different games in one day causes 2 problems. One, it's hard to keep track of where you are in the game and what's going on and what the puzzles are, or what even happened last time if you stop every half an hour and then come back the next day. It's also there's setup downtime where you have to like turn off the game, close it, launch a new game, reacquaint yourself with where you left off, remind yourself the controls, then start. So if you keep changing games, there's actually like several minutes up to like maybe or significantly longer of downtime between each recording. So it's actually significantly less efficient to record several games per day. So try to avoid that. And then 999, I recorded Andrew's house, which is like an hour away. So I drive to his house and we record 999 all day long. And then I come home. So I have to make sure that I have enough scheduled in advance that I can do that, because I'll be gone for a day. So everything has to be pre-rendered and pre-uploaded and pre-recorded for while I'm gone. And I have to be set up that I'm ready for that kind of thing. New rule, 1 question, 20-second answer. Nope. I don't like lightning rounds. But there's been a few times where we try to do a Q&A with Bird and Wander, and they're all like, lightning round. It's like, no, people wrote a question, and they don't. It sucks to not get to every question necessarily, but if you give everyone like a micro answer that doesn't actually answer the question, then it just defeats the purpose of trying to answer questions in the first place, I think. I'm going to do Let's Play of Rome 3 on PC when it comes out. Yes, I have said that so many times, including in the playthroughs of Room 1 and 2. It's just, I don't have a setup for recording phone games, and unfortunately it's a phone game for now, so I have to wait for it to be not a phone game. I might be able to jerry rig a system for recording phone games, but then I have a whole awkward thing where I'd be like holding up an iPad. Actually, I'd be holding up an iPhone because I don't have an iPad. So I'd be holding a tiny iPhone here while trying to play it around a microphone, and then some kind of weird untested interface I've never used before might be able to pull a video out that I could record, but it might be laggy and glitchy, and it might not sync up with the commentary, and it might break. All this so we can get a shittier video, because it'll likely be lower resolution, but at the very least, Room 3 will probably look less good, because the other two Room games looked better when they were brought to PC, because they completely remade them with new textures. But yeah, generally it's a big old headache. If they take too long to bring it out on PC, I might eventually find a solution, but it just seems so much more ideal just to wait for a PC port so I can just have a proper experience with it. It's really unfortunate that it's not a simultaneous release on all platforms, but I'm sure they're a tiny company. I think I remember the credits being the shortest things ever, but I mostly just don't remember the credits. What'd you say is the best RPG to get on PC? That depends a whole lot on your preferences. A whole lot on your preferences. Like a whole lot on your preferences. I don't like making game recommendations to people I don't know, because I don't know anything about their tastes and stuff like that. In fact, it's really hard to recommend games to people you actually do know half the time. An RPG is such a vague term that everyone expects different things from it. Because like the three things that come to mind is like I could be like, you could check out Dark Souls, you could check out Witcher 3, you could check out Pillars of Eternity. You know what those are? Completely incompatibly different experiences. They're like incompatibly, massively divergent experiences that are just not the same thing. And then you have questions like, is Pyre an RPG? Is Legend of Grimrock 2 an RPG? I don't know. I guess the four things I would go to is like try Dark Souls, Witcher 3, Pillars of Eternity, and Legend of Grimrock 2. Just kind of take a look at those and see which one is the type of game you want, because they're very different ideas of like, how much do you want RPG gameplay and combat versus how much do you want RPG storytelling? And then there's a question of like, do you prefer being an RPG storyteller in terms of like just having a robust story, or do you also want to have an impact on that story on a consistent basis, like an actual role-playing game as opposed to RPGs? Or do you prefer like the dungeon delving thing with the puzzles and traps, which is what Grimrock does better than any of the other games? And like you can't recommend any of these games over each other, like at all. Do you like Starbucks coffee or hot chocolate? I'm going to assume that the hot chocolate is also from Starbucks. Otherwise, it's like Starbucks coffee versus the concept of hot chocolate. I don't go to Starbucks. Maybe. I mean, isn't it just caffeine and sugar basically? So I probably like it technically, but I've never gone to a place. I don't go to a place for coffee. That's so much work to go to a specific location for the purpose of coffee, which is like an ever-present thing that everyone has in their homes and at work and everywhere. Like coffee is just a thing that occurs naturally, like tap water, which doesn't. It's not what natural means, but you know what I mean. Like it's just part of life that exists, and I just drink coffee. I used to not drink coffee. I used to always drink. For a lot of my teenage years, there's always sodas and energy drinks. Then I moved on towards tea during college, but then I got broken of it during my geology trips because we would have coffee available and nothing else if you wanted caffeine sources. And I was not looking forward to headache withdrawal syndromes in the middle of a long hiking trip, so I grew used to coffee, which is fine. I don't have a particular preference for coffee in general. It's just I just have a black coffee usually, and I'm like, that serves the purpose of being the caffeine that I was looking for, and I drink it at the correct temperature so that it's not a miserable experience, and that's the process. Oh, Harvey the hurricane, right? I live in a shitty little bubble where I barely pay attention to what's going around in the world sometimes. Uh, so I forgot. I think I only read about Harvey this morning on Imgur or something like that when I was just browsing. Like, oh, a hurricane's happening, and I think they were saying that it's a higher wind speed than Katrina was because everything's always compared to Katrina. But I heard that also this is not Louisiana, but instead not New York, but instead Texas. So it's not really comparable to Katrina because the same risk doesn't usually apply, I think. But I'm nowhere near Texas or the Southeast or anything. I'm in California, so it's not really applicable. That was the earlier question about are you safe from Harvey that I didn't finish asking because I'm like, I don't know what that means. I can play Dark and Light. Don't know what that means. Oh shit, I scrolled wrong and it skipped. Why do you do that? Sometimes when I scroll, it skips ahead. I'm like, you fuck, I was trying to keep track of where I was going. Have you ever played any of the Kingdom Hearts series? I played the first game something like 50 to 75% of the way through. Uh, and then that was when it was new. More recently, I played the shitty one of the shitty ones. Kingdom Hearts and number over number equals a fraction of years per day or something. It's Kingdom Hearts officially has one of the worst naming schemes of any franchise. These are shitty titles. They don't make sense. They're irritating to remember, and they're like the opposite of selling points because they make you not want to buy the game because you don't even want to figure out what what the title means. This dream drop distance and RE chain of memories. I'm like, come on, man. This is too much of a mess. I hated it. I first of all, I had to play it on DS because that's what it was on. And playing in an action RPG on the DS is something I never want to replicate ever again because it's just a shitty little uncomfortable thing to hold and crunch your neck down towards and play like low res things where you have like no spatial awareness around yourself at all because it's a tiny screen and it's a tiny camera and that was not a great time. But as an adult, every time I've tried to look back at any part of Kingdom Hearts, from its continuity to its storytelling to anything about it, nothing really seems appealing about it, to be honest. I don't really care about this Final Fantasy crossed with Disney world, and its continuity has gotten so convoluted at this point that it doesn't even work as being a simple children's story like it originally was. So I don't really know what their goal is for that franchise anymore, and I'll probably just ignore it forever instead of trying to re-engage with it because there's just so many other options. Do you ever think you'll go back to The Witness? I actually planned on it at one point. I had a series planned called The Witness 1 year later, where I was going to play The Witness last January, and I was just going to replay the whole game again. And not the whole, I wasn't going to be completionist about it again because that would take too long. But go through the basic progression towards like the main, like the easy ending, I suppose, and just like sort of revisit the basic puzzles without going super Easter egg hunting and stuff like that. Because that takes too long. Still might do it. Maybe I'll do like The Witness 2 years later because 4 more months and we'll be in, or actually more like 3 more months and we'll be back in January again, and it'll be the 2-year anniversary of The Witness. It's just very hard to revisit games because I have such a gargantuan to-do list of games to play at all times that replaying games or going back to games for DLC or doing alternate runs of games is just like more time spent on one game that I could spend on another game, especially since I'm somebody who finishes games instead of just playing like 3 episodes and stopping all the time. Because I tend to finish games, it's just all the more hard to make time for everything. Let's see. Questions I've definitely answered before. Do I like roguelike games? Not particularly. I find the reset that's caused by death kind of unappealing. I definitely prefer a game like Sundered or Rogue Legacy where the death is in itself a form of progression through some kind of system, but that also runs into an additional trap of sorts. Because I don't like roguelikes where you just reset over and over again and you start the game over and at most you're kind of making some progress. Like I know that in Binding of Isaac you're technically unlocking new content the more you play it, but like every time I die in a roguelike, I'm like, all right, I guess I'm done. And I feel like stopping usually and not playing anymore. Something more like FTL was neat because it replicates a tabletop experience where you like there's a lot of there's some single player or preferably co-op tabletop games you can play, like board games where you like all cooperate to try to complete an objective and survive some kind of scenario. And FTL felt more like that. And so like that kind of thing is interesting. But a lot of the roguelikes out there, once I die, I usually don't feel that much draw to continue. And I think that's because most roguelites actually feature a form of gameplay that I don't enjoy. Like the part where you play the game. Like Binding of Isaac. I don't like playing Binding of Isaac. I don't like using left stick to walk around in a top-down perspective through a series of screen-shaped rooms where poop monsters poop at you and you cry on them till they die, and bosses come in that have different pooping patterns, and like nothing about the actual gameplay is fun to me really. So I always just kind of never really want to go back, and that's true for most forms of roguelikes. Is they usually have a form of gameplay that I don't find particularly compelling. Tokyo Jungle was a game I used to play with Andrew that, while playing in co-op, I think is actually a pretty fun gameplay loop. That game had a problem, though, where it had a lack of randomization, so it didn't have enough content to be a proper roguelike. Uh, Necropolis, I believe, had a decent enough gameplay setup where that's the kind of thing that I might be able to get into, but its content and general everything was just too bland and boring. So while it had a decent setup, it didn't work. I've really been bummed out because Capcom was making a game called Deep Down or Down Below or something like that that looked like it was going to be a Dark Souls roguelike, and that thing looked really fun. And we've never seen anything about it for like 3 or 4 years now, and it's probably dead. So for me, the important thing might not be the roguelike genre. Well, I probably don't. There's a very good chance I don't like roguelikes with a K. The games that are like Rogue, but roguelites, meaning procedurally generated permadeath games, the format might not be the important part. The important part might just be the gameplay that they focus around. Because like I enjoyed Hand of Fate more than I ever enjoyed most things you could call a roguelike. So the core gameplay being so divergent because it's such a vague term means that it's hard to say if I like them or not. But I will say that procedural generation is a negative point for any game for me, because most games that have procedural generation just have more boring level design. And if you've ever watched me play The Witness to Dark Souls or Legend of Grimrock, you know that level design is a big plus for me. And so having it be a random scrambled number generator mess is kind of a bummer. It's just a step down from actual handcrafted level design. And I don't need a game that I can play forever, because I can just play games, plural, forever, because there's so many of them that I don't need one game to last forever. So procedural generation's primary selling point of being infinitely replayable is not really a selling point for me. And Bloodborne really showed us how shitty it can be, because Bloodborne is such a masterclass of game design across the board until you get to the Chalice dungeons, which is where the procedural recombinating room stuff comes in, and you just see how disappointing it is by comparison. And I feel like almost any gameplay loop could be improved by being handcrafted instead of randomly generated. Have you ever thought about a group playthrough of How to Full Boyfriend? Or have you put more thought into it? Nope. That just was a random conversation that happened in like a podcast or stream or something at some point. Maybe it'll happen one day, maybe it won't. It's not easy because we have to set up a really weird system where one of us is playing a game, then streaming the video to the other people, because Wander, Bird, and I all live in 3 different states. So we can't just meet up on a couch. Will I ever play it with Andrew? Possibly. Andrew and I talk about the idea of playing Hatchful Boyfriend or Dream Daddies sometimes, just sort of as a joke, but also like, yeah, doing stuff as a joke is also kind of our job sometimes. Like it's doing things that seem like a joke can totally be a valid form of entertainment, so it's fine. But there's a lot of hoops to go through if we do it with Wander and Bird and maybe Shell for like Hatchful Boyfriend. And right now the primary concern is that Divinity Original Sin 2 is supposed to go hit 1.0 soon. And finally come out. And so like that'll probably be a distraction for quite some time. Let's see. Do you like the spooks? Like just scary stuff? I'm not particularly in a hurry to experience like the concept of fear necessarily, but I like horror usually for what it makes you think about, because a lot of horror will often dive into like existential horror stuff like Soma does, and I think what Observer is going to probably do. But also I like horror aesthetic, like, and also the definition of horror goes all over the place, because I think that Green Room and Neon Demon both are horror movies technically, but like yeah, like the going into the morbid and the macabre is interesting for movies and games, and so like that's the part of horror that I'm interested in. The theme park ride part, I don't care about. Yes, these are really my headphones that I am using right now. I've not tried Skyforge. Sometimes I can't tell if you're talking about real games or not. What are your thoughts on YouTube's demonetization issues that are happening right now? I think that YouTube is doing probably the best they can on some level. They've been faced with a difficult situation, which is that uh, with the apocalypse situation, it's because news outlets were reporting on the fact that people's ads were being played in front of controversial video content, like really horrible, deplorable stuff. And so what they had to do is figure out how to make that stop as fast as possible, because if it kept happening, there'd be a problem where all of those people would just stop buying ads, which means that the entire revenue system collapses essentially. So I get that, because I don't want the revenue system to collapse, because that's also my income. But their way of fixing the part that could destroy my income is also a thing that hurts my income. But I'm it really feels like a stopgap measure that isn't, like, it's a work in process. Right now, there's a thing where they just have a whole bunch of word filtering bot nonsense that flags your videos as being not suitable for all advertisers. So we have a series of icons that show up. One of them is a dollar sign that's green. The green dollar sign means that your video can play ads, and it's just a normal video. If it's a dollar sign crossed out, that means it's demonetized. That generally that only happens to me if it's copyright problems, which happens constantly because video games have tons of cutscenes and audio content that is often leads to copyright matches and whatnot. So it's a bummer, but it happens. Like since I'm already dealing with that, that makes the next thing not hurt as much anyway. Which is that sometimes it's a yellow dollar sign. I need a drink. Sometimes it's a yellow dollar sign, which means that it's not entirely applicable for. Let's look at the phrasing they use, because I can just bring up my own video page. Yellow dollar sign says limited or no ads. Basically, it says that your video is not suitable for all advertisers. The exact meaning of that is completely in the dark, because YouTubers are constantly in the dark about how certain systems work in the background. But basically, the idea is that some bot has marked your video as not being suitable for all advertisers. What percentage of advertisers that is, hard to say. I would just to take a general guess, like I would say that, like, I don't know, the Christian Alliance or something like that would be like, we don't want to put videos and we don't want our ads on anything that's even vaguely objectionable. Whereas maybe like Pornhub will just advertise on anything, and who cares? I don't think Pornhub advertises on YouTube. Do they? I'm not sure. So that kind of stuff, like certain advertisers would be like, fuck it, put our stuff on everything, where other ones are like, we are a family organization. So if the boss determined that your stuff isn't entirely friendly for everyone, then it flags it as yellow, and only some ads can play on it and not other ones, which means that if ads that are within that specific range are not available, that means you do get no ads, and you might get no ads. The exact, like, it's probably not a yes or no thing. It's probably like a whole gradient, left or right, based on what the bots have determined was not friendly about your video. But we don't get to know. So like, we don't know what percentage of advertisers are okay with your video, or what the thing was that flagged it in the first place. And if you look at an individual series, to look at the different names or stuff like that in the videos to figure out what caused them to get flagged or not flagged, it's basically incomprehensible. It kind of feels like a random number generator, and it's definitely like not something you can say is working necessarily. I'd say that's pretty objectively not a functioning, reliable system right now. But at the moment, like, you just have to deal with the fact that it's a work in process, and they had to make this change as fast as possible in order to stop people from pulling out, and then they can hopefully fix it over time. Hopefully. But at the moment, I'm not like in some kind of free for all. Everything's not on fire. If I look at my ad revenue, I don't know if I can even notice a specific change to signify that I'm in specific trouble right now. But even if I was, my Patreon is a huge percentage of my overall income, so all the more reason for why I did Patreon in the first place. I did it in the first place because I'm like, look, I'm busy. At the time, I had a full-time job, and I was like, I I have to make money so I can pay rent, and I was juggling my full-time job with YouTube. So I'm like, YouTube needs to make me money, or I don't know if I can spend time on it. So that's why I made the Patreon the first time. Then Patreon grew, and I'm like, well, now my Patreon and my YouTube ad revenue are both big enough that like I can do this full time. And so I was like, well, this is incredibly risky, but let's go ahead and just take this risk and quit my job and go for it, because I felt like I'd regret it if I didn't. Like it felt like it would suck if I went my whole life not having taken this risk to try it. And nowadays, the bigger your Patreon is, the more you can be like, well, now I'm safer from any weird shit that happens on YouTube because I have an alternate revenue stream that's independent of that entirely. So it's a lot like why you'll see Rooster Teeth, for example, uploads videos for YouTube. Those YouTube videos will get YouTube ad revenue, but they also upload those videos on their personal site, which I think also gets ads. I haven't looked at their personal site for a long time. But then they also have the Rooster Teeth First membership, which is essentially their equivalent of a Patreon, in that it's a thing that you voluntarily subscribe to and comes with perks. Uh, and then on top of that, they sell merch. Like all those things happen. The reason why you see YouTubers diversified that much isn't like, I mean, some of it could be just a general concept of greed and intention to just make as much money as possible, but it's also a diversification of revenue streams, because any of them individually is not really a reliable thing that you can base your entire life on. But having them all together comes together as like a series of incomes that where any of them can pick up the slack for any of the other ones. Which reminds me that somebody asked me if there was going to be a Keith Ballard shirt. I don't really have merch ideas, honestly. I don't know if I have a big enough audience that I could actually afford to do any kind of merch. Uh, and I don't really have any special designs. I'm not a meme channel full of memes that has like 100 memes I could print on a shirt because of all the quotes I do all the time. Like there's like maybe two things that could come to mind for people, and they're not particularly visual. Uh, it might be eventually possible to like work out a deal with Wanderbot about the idea of like we could talk about the idea of like whether or not I could try to sell merch that has like my banner art on it or something like that, because that's just a picture. But there's a lot of complexities that I've not fully looked into about how exactly you set up a store. And one of the concerns, of course, is that when you want to sell like shirts or mugs or something, you generally have to like sell like you have to make a batch of them. You don't make them to order like you're at that I'm made to order like Wendy's or something like that. Like they don't ask for thing and then you just make the thing and you make the exact number that was said. What you do is you put out an order. So essentially, you'll announce it to your audience. You put out a pre-order. That's why you have all these channels. They're like, you have 1 week to buy our new shirt. It's because you have 1 week to buy the shirt, which they've not made yet. They've only made a design for. Then they're going to ship out the thing, and they're like, okay, this many people ordered it, and so they'll probably make like that many plus like I don't know 5% seems to be how it works. Like they'll make a few more just in case stuff goes wrong or whatever, and then they will ship out those shirts to the people that ordered them, and there has to be a sufficient number of them or the entire thing will just be you'll just lose your ass on the money, like, or it'll be a huge crippling expense to the person whose idea this was in the first place. uh and then those people have those, and then those shirts are gone forever unless they order a new one from scratch. Like it's a continuously making products for merch is actually really difficult unless you're at a specific audience size where you can just make them indefinitely. And that's why you'll also see like people like Philip DeFranco have like 1 month offerings of shirts, and like Game Grumps will be like, here's the video talking about the new shirt. It's gone forever after this and stuff like that, is because like that's how this works when you're not like supplying your clothes to like Macy's or whatever. Boom. Can you react to don't know what that means? Yep, people are saying words I don't understand. Dare I look up? It's probably another YouTuber. Are people trying to like create some sweet YouTube drama or something? Oh well. I'm just going to not look at any of that. Let's see. Oh, cool. Somebody's just being a terrible human being. Okay, fun. I know who to ban from everything. That's fun. All right, well, that person doesn't exist anymore. I'm glad that people are shitty humans. Is that also a shitty human there? Are shitty humans just coming in here? Oh, yeah. All right, well, you're also banned. There we go. Yeah, some people are all like, this is infringing on freedom of speech." It's like, this YouTube is social media. You understand that? Like, YouTube is social media. This is like my Facebook profile you guys are on right now. I can block anyone I fucking want. It's pretty easy. Let's see. Oh, lost track of where I was again. Let's see. Uh, as for the Q&A questions that are emailed to me, that'll be back for the Q&A. The Q&A with the side of video game series is like, that's a whole other thing. This is like a weird like stream uh experiment, I suppose. So I'm just taking them live because if I don't take the questions live and just read questions from the email, then it like defeats the purpose of the stream in the first place. Was the orange thing by your window? Oh, right. I can actually grab that. I don't know why I'm wearing headphones because I'm not listening to anything. It's just out of habit when I'm recording, but I'm not actually listening to anything right now. So the headphones don't serve a purpose. This is a chert rock. Oh, actually, you can see that better than I thought. So I think I referenced this at some point during an earlier Let's Play or something at some point. But basically, there are microorganisms in the ocean that create their entire exoskeleton out of either like calcite or quartz or silicon, but functionally that's quartz. And when they die, their bodies just sink down into the ocean. And what happens is that if they are made of if they have a calcium based like carbonate skeleton, they're less hard, they're less resilient. So what ends up happening is that they basically just dissolve via pressure when you get far enough underwater, which purifies it purifies essentially the selection of skeletons there is. And so after you get to a certain depth, all you have left is the exoskeletons that are made of quartz and silicon and stuff like that. And so those ones go down to the bottom of the ocean, they compress together, and they make this rock. And it's one of my favorite rocks because it's just bizarre. So it's got this really weird, smooth, like waxy feeling, and its weight can only be described as being wrong. Whatever it looks like is not the weight it has. It's not like pumice. This isn't like super light. But for some reason, the weight of this thing always felt weird. They're always like, it's always made of bright pastel colors. I've seen chert rocks that look like they're basically like they look like edible. They look like they're made of taffy that's hardened into a rock. And so I got this at a rock auction because we have in the geology major we'd have auctions for rocks. The idea was it's usually about a bunch of pretty rocks and crystals and things that are actually kind of valuable, and you'd auction them off. And the idea is that the auction helps support the geology department at the college so that they can continue to buy supplies and send people on trips and everything like that, so the major can function. And so this is one I got while I was there, and I've kept it around. It's in the window because that I have a blackout curtain there, and it has a tendency to let light leak out by it, and that makes it hard to sleep in the morning sometimes. What if I'm depending on like because I don't have my own I don't have a boss and I don't have a specific set in stone schedule. I might stay up late and I might stay up late and wake up late on a given day. And so getting woken up early by the sun really sucks. And so at one point I started putting the rock on the windowsill just to hold the curtain closer against the wall to make it so it doesn't let light leak through right by my face, because that's not ideal. And that's why I have a big old rock on the window. That's both why I have the rock and why it's there right now. Let's put this anywhere. Putting that anywhere else. Okay. Food reviews. No. What? No. I don't even know how to I don't even know how to review food, honestly. I don't even understand the concept of reviewing food. What's your opinion about global warming? It's real, and it's not really even an opinion. It's just like a scientific fact, and people who, boy oh boy, when you're in geology, there's two people that you encounter early on that often end up stopping the major relatively quickly, which is people who don't believe in global warming, which believe is a misleading word to use in the first place because it suggests that it's like a belief you can just opt in and out of as opposed to an observed fact about reality. It's not like a question of whether you believe in God. Like it's like no, it's literally it's there. You can just look at it. It's easy. It's it's not something you opt into, like whether or not you believe in karma. Um, but the global warming people have issues, and then there's the people who think that God created the world a few thousand years ago, and that dinosaurs were placed there by the devil and stuff like that. It's like, you're taking a paleontology course. You can't really do that. Like, I understand that on some level, science is always about asking questions, and it's always a work in process. So, like, to say scientists know something is a misnomer in a way because it's always like a work in process understanding, and we're always challenging what we think about stuff to begin with. That's the whole point. But you can't just throw everything out the window and just start saying that the devil placed fossils underground to trick humanity and stuff like that. Uh, that's You're gonna have to present some more for that kind of stuff. So it's very hard to have any real conversation about global warming because the people who think that it's a hoax kind of just decided on a specific truth that was convenient to them, and they're not generally open to any kind of outside evidence because all of it's clearly, if you're already willing to buy into that kind of thing, then you're usually somebody who's willing to just hand wave away literally any evidence that contradicts you as being invalid and glomming onto anything that you believe in as being totally valid. And that's a problem humanity has, and it's never going to go away. Let's see. Did I ever play Killer 7? No. Let's see. Do you like turtles? I am apathetic to turtles. And now Andrew's here, or Andrew was here at the part that I've now scrolled down to. And there's Wanderbot, also in chat. Okay. I've just reached that point. Looking for questions. Will I continue the Mist series after Riven? Yes. When? I don't know. It's up there with like all. I also say I'm going to play all the BioWare games, and I'm going to play the Witcher games, and I'm going to play the Mist games, and I'm going to play the Deus Ex games, and so on. Like I'll get around to it. The Patreon can choose to play them right away. Otherwise, I would logically probably try to space them out because it's generally, if you think, you can kind of look at I suppose, for example, Game Grumps as an example, like they started doing Sonic games, and the Sonic games they realized do super, super, super well, and so then they space out the Sonic games. You don't, the moment something does well, you don't immediately go like, I'm going to play everything that qualifies as that back to back forever, because you run out of that stuff almost immediately, and then you're like, well, that's the end of that. It's kind of nice to let time pass a little bit and play one of the things every few months or something, just so that like it feels like an event each time, kind of like, oh yeah, now he's playing the Mist game finally, that's great, as opposed to marathoning them all back to back can be a little bit of a bummer because then it's just over and you're like, well, now what now? And it's good to have a rotation of background things that the audience constantly demands that you can play while alternating with new stuff that you want to play that the audience isn't necessarily demanding but can surprise them and turn out to be cool anyway, because then you're spreading out the thing that people want to help be more of an event as you get to each one, but also it's also functioning as a backup plan, because whenever things aren't going so great and people aren't super into the current playthroughs, you're like, now it's time to break the glass and open up the next Mist game, for example. That's like emergency glass, not the Mist game being in a glass box. So that's technically a glass box, kind of, but you know what I mean. Uh, but also when you're spreading them out and trying new things, the new thing you try could turn out to be the next Dark Souls, or could turn out to be the next Grimrock or Talos Principle, or next thing that turns out to be a big thing that you're then thinking about for the future. So it's one strategy, and generally I'd like to spread them out a little bit. Didn't mean to spread it out as much as I did, though. Damn, because it took me over a year and a half between Witness and Mist, and that was not the intention. I meant to play it sooner, but my to-do list is a nightmare, and it's impossible to keep track of. Let's just link that in the chat so people can see the nightmare that is me trying to figure out what the hell to do with myself half the time. Does that work, I wonder? Let's see here. I think I can link whatever I want in chat because it's me, right? Yeah, probably. Probably. All right. Yeah, so I'm back to the. I was able to control F back to the question I asked after that because it skipped me down to the bottom. Let's see here. Can you be supported by the Amazon Prime ABO on Twitch? I don't know what that means. Don't know what that means. How old are you? 28. No, 27. I had to check. I had to remind myself. I'm like, no, it's 2017. I've gotten to the age now where I don't think about my age as much. So when you're a kid, you constantly know what your age is because you're thinking about it too much. Like, I am 14 and a half and stuff like that. But I've gotten to the age where I have to do math to remember my age. It's like, okay, what year is it? 1990. So it's like, what year is it? 2017. So add 10. I'm 27. Okay, because I was born 1990 and math is very easy. But I don't think about it enough to remember. So I think about my age wrong half the time when I think about it. What kind of stuff is the premise for questions? Stuff you want to know that isn't utterly inappropriate, basically. Do you ever get nervous, excited for specific games when Patreon games get nominated? Yes. At one point, people were nominating Overwatch, and I was like, how the hell do I do a let's play of a multiplayer shooter that I understand nothing about? Aren't all the comments just gonna be about like how garbage I'm being? And in fact, I had a similar thought whenever something like This War of Mine or FTL gets nominated, because I'm like, those are games where I'm like, there's like a correct way to play these games. I get to look forward to like what might be years of comments explaining all the things I did wrong, which is true for FTL. I get constant, even now, I get constant new comments about how bad I was at FTL and all the times. At 36 minutes and 17 seconds, you made this call when you should have made that call. And I'm like, fucking, that was like a year ago, man. I don't even remember what you're talking about. And frankly, you should have the self-awareness to know I was new at the game, and that was clearly made clear the whole time. But sure, let's act like I'm a super pro that would totally do everything right all the time, and you can act like you're surprised, apparently. So that stuff makes me a little nervous sometimes. Then there's stuff like when people nominate Zelda or Mist, where it's like, oh shit, here it goes. It's one of those playthroughs, the hyped ones. So it's like now there's like a pressure to do it right, essentially. Like, not like, are you playing the game correctly, but are you like experiencing the game correctly? And are you paying it the proper respects? Or is this all going to come burning down? Because like, what if Ocarina of Time wins and I don't like it? I could not like it. There's plenty of people that don't like Ocarina of Time, despite the fact that it's like framed as being an impossibility. That reminds me. Just gonna make. Hey, Andrew, you're a mod now, and I should probably make Wander a mod too or something. Let's find Wander. There we go. Wander, you're a mod now. So if people start coming into troll, then you can just ban those people or something. Because that was an unfortunate thing that happened earlier. Really uncommon. I don't really get insufferable people too often, mostly because I constantly filter them out. There's a really nice thing on YouTube where you can shadow ban people, which is that they don't know they're banned for a while, really, and they can keep making comments, and when they type in a comment and hit enter, they'll see their own comment and they can see it there, but only they can see it. It's like as if you go to Facebook and you post something, and like how you can tell what people are allowed to see the posts, like only for friends or only these people and stuff like that. But in the case of YouTube, it's like setting their privacy settings being all their posts being private and only see it visible to them, but they don't know that, which is great for dealing with really shitty people because they don't know they're banned for a while, so they won't try to go around it by like making another account or something because they don't know that they've been banned yet to begin with. So they just won't notice for a while. I'm like, this is great. They can leave asshole comments constantly, and I never have to see them, and I can stop seeing all the comments of all the people that get in fights with them constantly. I don't go ban happy or anything like that. Like I don't ban everyone who disagrees with me or everyone who says anything I vaguely don't like, but people that say like completely reprehensible things or straight up spam or advertise their channel on my videos, I just ban them forever. I'm like, bye. Don't need to deal with you. And I've really never regretted any of them so far. Seems like it was always worth it each time. It's a very long list, but that's mostly because there's a lot of people that want to promote their channels and everyone else's videos by like, look at my channel. I'm like, no, go away forever. And that just does that. Let's see. Lots of people saying they're fans of things. Thank you. Still looking for the questions in here, though. Do you have a job to fall back to if YouTube and Patreon fail, or you just decide to quit? Not really. I'd have to just apply for a job again. I don't have like one that's just waiting for me necessarily, but I could probably get the same job again that I had before if I really wanted to, but I really don't want to. I'd have to figure some stuff out. About what I'd even want to work at because I've worked at retail before and I don't want to put myself through that again because it's just miserable. The customers treat you like crap generally, but also your own company treats you like crap. Although I had a pretty bad case of like it wasn't like a mom and pop store or anything like that. I worked at Best Buy, which is like the king of stores where the customers don't want you around because they know that Best Buy employees are annoying, and then you're painfully aware of why Best Buy employees are annoying because you are the Best Buy employee and you know what your bosses keep telling you to do, and it sucks because your bosses are like actively having the worst ideas. I worked at a place where you would get punished if they reviewed you midway through the day and you didn't have the current shrink numbers memorized. Like or even sales numbers. Like you're supposed to know what's selling and what's not selling and what's being stolen that particular day based on the last updated numbers. And if you don't know that, then you could get written up. And it's like, what am I supposed to sell harder? I can't control what people walk in the door. I'm not the fucking Best Buy PR manager or like advertising section. So that was a miserable thing. Just in general, being like in one of those jobs that hires like teenagers and stuff to sell products, you're not going to a place that's going to treat you well or respect you as a person. And I think that I'm too nervous around random people to work at a restaurant. The idea of approaching random tables, I don't want to be a waiter ever. So I prefer not. Probably try to go somewhere working with my hands, see if I can get into some sort of like surveying job or something. One of the things I liked about my last job is that I started progressing towards this thing where I could go on trips. It was me and one other person, and we were just there to take water samples. So we spent the entire day driving up and down California to a bunch of pre-existing spots, and we would like stick instruments in the water to get measurements, and we would take physical water samples by filling these things up with water. Then we just put them in the cooler, and we just drive to the next spot. And that'd be our whole day as we kept doing that over and over again until we had all the sites down. Then we drive back to the place and put them in the lab and then go home. Those are nice days. I could get behind that kind of thing as a day job because you just hang out in the car with another person, have conversation, listen to the radio, and just do busy work for a while. That's way more engaging than being in a cubicle. Because before then I was doing busy work that was spreadsheets all day in a gray cubicle where you like you will never miss that. Like I never missed a single time, I think, my lunch break or the 2 times I could go out for a walk for 15 minutes because I just needed to not be in the cubicle for a few minutes to survive. So driving around all day with another person is so much better. But I prefer just to make this not die. Care to share what upcoming games are coming to the channel? I don't know. Every time I finish a game, I then figure out what's going to replace it. Aside from that, there's just the giant spreadsheet that I linked earlier that had not been linked when you asked this question yet, but that's a giant to-do list, and I pick as we go, more or less. Looking for question marks. Will I ever set up a PO box for fan mail? If I keep growing, it's probably an inevitability. Right now, somebody brings up the idea. Somebody brings up the idea of a PO box like once every 6 months. It's like, hey, I like maybe this, like in your case, you're not even saying you would send me, but just asking about the general idea. But basically, like once or twice a year, somebody would be like, I would send you something if you had a PO box, and I'm like, great. I appreciate the thought, but PO box costs money, and I just in general, part of going full time on this, one of the first things I did was just cut as many expenses as I could and unsubscribe from a ton of different things and make sure that I'm not leaking money constantly. And that's kind of a form of leaking money, is would be adding a PO box to that list. So uh, much like much like the idea of doing merch, I just have to be sure that it makes sense on a money level, on some level. And in this case, it's not that I expect to profit from a PO box, because I don't. It's fan mail, but I have to be in a situation where I have enough reason to think that people would be constantly wanting to send stuff to it, that it's worth having open. Because if I'm paying for it and nothing's coming to it, then it would be kind of like a weird, like it'd just be another money hemorrhage on a long list of money hemorrhages. uh, Stuff like World of Warcraft subscriptions and so on. Maybe one day I'll just experiment and just open a PO box for like a tiny window of time and make a video announcement, and then leave the video announcement up for a week, then take down the video announcement so nobody else finds out about it after that point, and then, you know, like be ready to cancel the PO box after like 1 month or however long the intervals are, and it'd be like a one-time chance potentially, and then that'd be like an experiment that would be informative to as to how much interest people have and that kind of thing. But it's really weird to like, it's like Amazon wish lists and PO boxes. Like, I was already so uncomfortable opening my Patreon that I had trouble sleeping that entire night, because I thought my entire fan base was going to turn on me just for suggesting the idea of a Patreon. So it goes without saying that I'm a little nervous about the idea of PO boxes or Amazon wish lists, and the various things that are essentially like asking people to give me stuff, because the entitlement is awful. So it's hard not to suggest that you might go that way. I worry about how it reflects on me, when it's just like oftentimes things that people are asking for me to do myself. I kind of got lost track of where I was going with that a little bit. Let's see. I'm actually getting near the bottom, so you might want to ask more questions. Oh wait, never mind. It's almost 4 o'clock, so we need to do the podcast soon anyway. So it's actually probably a good thing I might be running out of questions. If you had infinite money, would you still do YouTube for fun? Yeah, this is a thing I did for free for years. I started this in 2011. I started with Andrew in 2011. I started my channel in 2013, and it wasn't until like 2015 or 20, was it 2015? Something like that. Yeah, 2015, I moved for my job, and even then I was still not making money on YouTube really. So for years and years and years, I did YouTube when it wasn't an income source. And so yeah, I would still do it. Would I do it on the scale I do right now? Probably not. Uh, if right now I treat it as a full-time job, because I require that for revenue and everything like that. If it was not something that was my job anymore, I would probably chill out a bit. I might go back to playing like 1 or 2 games at a time, and maybe even making decisions that aren't really good for the channel's growth, because I don't need it to grow anymore. Like lately, I've been really, really, really hooked to State of Decay, and I've really wanted to play State of Decay more than most of the other games. So if I didn't care about the channel's organization or income or balance and stuff like that, I might just binge through State of Decay and put up like 3 videos of State of Decay per day, and then like 1 video of Riven, and then like nothing else. And like, nope, this is just what I'm focusing on right now. Like, it's possible. Part of me might feel enough guilt that I'd be like, no, let's shuffle in a few other things. But I might be a little more fast and loose with my structure and rules if I didn't have to be consistent. Because some of these rules are here not only for income reasons, but also just like I need a certain level of discipline and consistency so that this whole thing keeps running. Because you can look at, for example, Andrew with the sad games or birdcatcher games with birdcatcher and stuff like that as ideas of like what can happen to a channel when they don't have really specific structures in place and really specific incentives in place. Is it can just peter out for months at a time, or I uploaded 3 videos this week, I uploaded 7 videos this week, I uploaded 1 video every other week, and like it can just go into wildly different directions, because without a structure and incentive system, like it can just die off, and a lot of channels have. And so like I structure things intentionally to keep it going because I need it to. And there's, if the conditions were different, it might be possible to emphasize different purposes there. What's the first game you played and why did you start YouTube? First game I played ever? I can't tell you for sure if you mean ever. I might guess either Ninja Gaiden or Super Mario Brothers or Duck Hunt. I grew up with a copy of Ninja Gaiden and the Mario Duck Hunt combination cartridge, so that might have been my first video games ever, but I don't really know for sure. I just don't know for sure. First game I played on YouTube was Akane the Kunoichi, which was an Xbox Live indie game I played for the sad games. At the time, the idea was that we would pre-record a 10-minute video of an indie game, then we'd play it back, and Andrew and I would talk over that. So we took turns being the one who recorded the game, and we would talk over it. That only lasted like 1 session, so there's like 7 episodes of that or something, and then before long, we were like, nope, that doesn't work. We should do the commentary live, which led to Andrew messing up the sync, and all the audio was out of sync and stuff like that. But it eventually kind of got figured out and whatnot. But yeah, if you haven't heard of Akane the Kunoichi, it's because nobody has. But it is spelled the same way as Akane from 999. How are you this good with words? This is all improvised. There's no uhs, and your explanation seemed clear. There's got to be uhs, aren't there? I don't know. I think I backlog a lot of information. I think I have a bunch of thoughts pre-queued that I'm planning to get to, and I'm thinking ahead a little bit, and I tend to be already having a structure of where I'm trying to go with my thoughts. So then it leads to a situation where my mouth is just trying to catch up with that. So at that point, I've got enough ideas anyway. It's easier to do this now when I'm not playing, when I'm not doing a let's play, because I'm not being distracted by a game. Whereas like sometimes I'll notice Wanderbot will like, it's actually like I think it's a daily occurrence. You can see him start one sentence over like 4 times in a row because the game is getting in the way. But right now I'm just sitting here talking, and I can talk. I've had practice for years. Yes, my name is Keith. Let's see. Final thoughts on Mass Effect Andromeda. There's going to be a spoiler cast. I'm sorry it's been so long. I'm working on notes because I need to like put a bunch of notes in place so I can structure the sheer number of topics. Like I was going to just start talking about it like I did with Defenders, which I did was spoiler cast I did solo for the first time. But there's too much stuff to cover for Andromeda. So while I don't have the time to do a video essay, as much as I would kind of love to do that, because I love video essays, but I've never made one. So I can't like write out a full script and then edit it to a bunch of video and like make a proper video essay. I do need to make a very extensive list of bullet points to cover all the different topics and things I want to cover, or it just won't be everything I want to discuss. It's too big of a topic to cover in its entirety off the cuff. Not at least unless I was able to talk it with somebody else, but I can't do a spoiler cast with another person because none of the people I know played Andromeda, especially not all the way through. So and the one that did play it, Wanderbot, definitely does not care about it enough to talk about it on the level of depth that I'd like to. And so I'm trying to create a spoiler cast for Andromeda that is sufficiently in depth to cover all the thoughts that people missed out on by not watching the playthrough, which many people said they wanted to hear my thoughts on the game, but they didn't want to actually watch the full playthrough because it's Mass Effect Andromeda. I can't really blame them. I forgot about it for a very long time. I completely forgot that I ever promised a spoiler cast because once Andromeda was out of my life, it was very easy to just let it stay out of my life. But once somebody was like left a disappointed comment about how I still haven't done it, and I'm like, oh shit, I forgot completely. I haven't thought about Andromeda in months, and it felt good. But that comment reminded me, and so I've been working on notes to make it work again. Let's see. What would your dream game be? What would you mash together? No. This is a recurring question, and I reject the premise because this is a problem. This is a problem in that people can only visualize what they want as being a mixture of things that uh, people have a problem where they keep only contextualizing things as a mixture of things they already like, when oftentimes what's good is something that's actually new. Like, I want something like Witness or Zelda that can actually like surprise me and become a thing that I didn't know I wanted. Like, that's valuable. And you don't get that by just saying mash things together. Or at least I couldn't pre-say that I want things mashed together that would lead to Zelda, the Breath of the Wild, for example, or The Witness, because the individual things that you'd have to digivolve together and fusion ho to make that happen would not individually be things that I probably would like enough to even think about the idea of mixing them together in the first place. So no, I want good games, but the idea of it only being redundant of things I already like is a problem. In fact, I've been thinking about it a lot lately because I got through Ready Player One, and Ready Player One is a super conflicted story because on one level it is a really interesting dystopian future thing that is entirely plausible, that very well may be our future, and is terrifying. But on the other hand, it's just National Treasure slash Da Vinci Code, where it's like these people are following clues around to get the Declaration of Independence and stuff like that. And and to hide that, how generic and not very interesting the actual story is, all the way down to well, basically every detail, really. They basically cover it's like this plot stripped naked and covered itself in glue and rolled around in the 80s and just covered itself in 80s media. So it'd be so distracted by all the culture references that you won't notice that you're reading the most generic story you've ever read. And so, like, being things just being consistent of things you already like is a dangerous path to go down, I think. uh Someone says they're sad because they skipped their question because I didn't use a question mark. No, it's just that I there's a lot of chat, and every now and then the scroll will like skip a little bit, and I'm trying to keep track, but there's a lot of comments, and so if I can't recognize what I'm trying to, I have to scan because there's a whole bunch of text, and if I can't identify things as being a question, then I'll scan past it because, like, I'm not explicitly skipping questions generally, except for the stuff that people are just asking the same question over and over again. Uh, have you ever played Path of X? Oh, it skipped again. God damn it. Have you ever played Path of Exile? Yeah, I don't really care about it. I played Diablo 2 when it was new-ish, or around the time the expansion was out, or something like that. And for at that time, it was a new experience to be playing a top-down dungeon crawler that's multiplayer where you get loot constantly. Nowadays, I don't really care about what the RNG monsters are going to give me for loot. And I find that kind of gameplay is generally very, 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 very repetitive and almost simplistic. Like, you can spend a billion years planning your incredibly complicated build, but once you're playing the game, you're just clicking a lot usually, and it generally doesn't seem that interesting to me. So I just don't have any particular draw to it. And I also don't like Path of Exile's system of making all of your skills be on your items instead of your character, because that's just another stopgap of like just more things that I have to overthink about when I kind of just want to play the game. And I'd rather just have a character. I'd rather have a skill tree and items that have stats than have items that have skills and then having a stat tree. I don't think that switch was a one that's good for me. The colors on the sheet, the spreadsheet I linked to you earlier, they're just highlights, various levels of emphasis, and because stuff keeps piling up so fast, their entire meaning is diminished over time because there's so much shit stacking up. Are you ever gonna play Let It Die again? Maybe. If you ever ask me any questions about whether I'll go back to a game I once started and didn't quite get finished, the answer is always maybe. I always have dropped the game for one reason or another, that where it just wasn't working out or something like that, and it's just there's such a gamble between, like, it's just there's such diminishing returns at some point. Like, there's usually a reason I stopped playing in the first place, especially since it's so rare for me to stop playing a game. And oftentimes it just seems like a better idea to play other games that are new. Not to say the games themselves are new releases, but that they're new for the channel, rather than go back to a thing that usually only like a handful of people are asking for, that I usually stopped for a reason, honestly. And oftentimes it's because the game is some sort of insanely repetitive dungeon crawler that had some kind of progress gate that just wasn't really worth pushing past because it was just kind of overkill. Let's see. I don't know shit about Dauntless, like at all. I know it's a Monster Hunter like, but I don't know Monster Hunter games either, and I don't know anything specifically about Dauntless besides that it's a game coming out. Boo. Have you ever watched the Last Airbender cartoon? I watched random episodes on television at random, uh, and that's it. Like I saw random episodes on television. I never knew the story or how it pieced together necessarily, and I've never made any effort to actually go sit down and watch it front to back. I probably would like it, but there's also just so many other things I want to watch too, and it's just on that infinite, endless list. I did see the movie, which was it's the kind of movie that deletes itself from your brain the moment you're done with it because of how incredibly nothing it is. It's so every adaptation that's a series turned into a movie is so shit because they have so many plot points jammed in such tight time that none of it has any time to breathe, and so your brain just dumps it the moment it's over because you weren't able to internalize any of it. On top of it, otherwise being also generally garbage anyway. Let's see. When did you realize that you're awesome and liked by many people? No joke. The biggest self-esteem boost that you get is probably having a Patreon that is not only successful but disproportionately successful for your audience size. My Patreon has done a whole lot to make me feel like what I'm doing is right. Because like when you're a YouTuber, you constantly struggle with thinking that everything you're doing is wrong, and you have no idea. There's the imposter syndrome where everyone thinks that you think that you're going to get discovered one day. It's like, oh, you've actually sucked the entire time, and everyone's realized now, and they're leaving, and you're never funny, and nothing you do is entertaining, and all the negative comments always stand out. But having a Patreon where it's like, no, here's a huge list of people that are willing to financially support what you do because they like what you do so much, that really that does a whole lot to reinforce your self-esteem as to whether or not you're doing things right. And so that's one of the most noticeable ways to learn that kind of thing. Do you watch any anime, and do you have a favorite one? I like Death Note, Fooly Cooly, and Full Metal Alchemist, which I know are all popular stuff. So it's like anime elitists are always scoff at those answers, but that's the things I like. I don't really like anime very much generally. There's almost no tropes of anime that I particularly enjoy, but you can tell a story through any medium. So there are stories that I like, and it doesn't really matter whether they're anime or not. Basically, Full Metal Alchemist is a really cool story. Death Note is one of my favorite stories because it has almost no action of any kind and just constant raising of stakes and stuff like that. So it feels like something along the lines of Jessica Jones or Breaking Bad or so on, where it's like these two things are butting it out, like the Walter White versus Gus Fring in Breaking Bad feels in some ways like Light versus L in Death Note, where it's like two people are fighting with their minds and they're both manipulating a series of events and scenarios with the goal of getting the other person killed. And they can't attack each other directly generally. And that stuff is really interesting. That's fun to watch. And it just happens to be an anime, which is fine. Fooly Cooly is a fever dream, and I love it. But generally, I bounce off a lot of animes that I try to watch, and I have not watched an extensive amount of them. I don't like over-exaggerated expressions. I don't like really irritating female sidekicks that are just there to be damseled, and they constantly screech, and they're way too emotive all the time, and they're always yelling and yelling and yelling, and holy shit. I just don't I just don't want them. I generally don't care about anything that it can be vaguely compared to power levels or having an infinitely long 500 episode adventure with your friends to go accomplish something. That's generally not what I want in a story. But you can tell cool stories. I liked where Gangsta was going until it got canceled because his entire animation studio went under. I still keep meaning to go read the Gangsta manga so I can get caught up on that because the show's never coming back now. But like stuff like that. Stories can be told through anything. So there's stories that I like while they're also anime. basically. We're going to cut things off there because it's 4 minutes past 4, and wow, it's 4:04. And I'm supposed to be doing a podcast 4 minutes ago, so I'm going to get off. Thanks for coming by, everybody. This has been an experience. We might go back to Q&A with a side of video games next week. I didn't mean to do 2 live streams in a row, but I don't want the Q&A stuff to die off. So if you want to send questions to be answered in the Q&A with the side of video games series, I will probably return to those next week. And the email address is keithballardquestions@gmail.com. Otherwise, you can join us at the you can find my Patreon and our links to our Discord or my Twitter in the description of basically every video I upload, except I don't think I've updated the stream to have a proper description, but check other videos and you can find them there. If you can go to the Discord to generally talk to other fans all the time, and I'm in there periodically, but obviously I'm often recording and sleeping and whatnot, and you guys are in all sorts of different time zones, so my responses are variable, but I generally say stuff every single day in there. Thanks for coming by the stream, everybody, and I will see you next time.